This is part of the stream of solidarity for Animal Rebellion. And what we've got now is a sort of a session or a talk from Vanessa from the Animal Welfare Party. So they're like an international sort of group, and Vanessa is the leader of the Animal Welfare Party. So yeah, I guess without further ado, I'll pass over and yeah.
Hi everyone, good to see everyone. I can see a few of you there, so thank you so much for joining. I am just going to try and share my screen with you because this is a presentation that I'm going to talk you through, and hopefully this presentation will be online afterwards that you can refer back to or share with your friends and colleagues. So I'm just going to share screen. So hopefully you see my screen. Lawrence, do you see my screen?
Yeah, no, got it. Yeah, we can see.
Okay. And can anyone give me any kind of feedback on whether you can hear me okay?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah, okay. Okay. And you can see me okay?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes.
okay, great. So so hopefully this is the session that you meant to come to. This is an intro to Animal Welfare Party and our international movement of political parties for animals that we're part of. So hopefully that's where you meant to be. I don't mind if you are exiting now because that's not what you wanted. Following this session, so from 7 till 8, there is Professor Andrew Knight, who is talking on the topic of humane research methods in veterinary and other biomedical sciences. So he's following me, but this first session is a basic introduction to Animal Welfare Party and our international group. So just first of all, let me say thank you very much for joining us today, because I realise that these are very strange times that we're living through, and that because many of us are at home, there are kind of lots of competition for your time online. So thank you for having, you know, dedicated some time tonight to find out about Animal Welfare Party. I really appreciate that. And thank you also to Animal Rebellion for inviting us to take part in this stream of solidarity. It really means a lot to us, so thank you. So I am Vanessa Hudson. I'm the leader of Animal Welfare Party, and I've been the leader since 2010, so 10 years. And what I want to talk through today are the following points, just so you can tell if this is right for you. So it's an introduction to Animal Welfare Party, an introduction to the wider movement that we're part of. Hopefully, technology permitting, there's going to be some time for Q&A afterwards. And then I'm going to hand over to our next session, which is Professor Andrew Knight, as I mentioned earlier. And a slight disclaimer that I need to add here: I have never ever done a webinar like this before, so this is my first time. And the other disclaimer that I need to mention is that I do have a very small person in the house here, and I know there's a bit of a theme of young people bursting into rooms where people are doing webinars and saying something funny, so that could well happen, and if it does, don't be alarmed, I'm sorry. But so I'm going to go through who or what is Animal Welfare Party, because I realise that you may have heard something but not know very much. So we're a political party for animals that was established in 2006, so 14 years ago. And our mission really is to create a fairer world for people, animals and the environment. We want to raise the moral and legal status of animals, and ultimately that means to us ending speciesism. And one of the ways that we want to do that is by having dedicated representatives for animals at all levels of government, in our parliaments, in our assemblies, in our local councils, and any decision-making body basically where decisions are being made that affect animals or that affect the environment. At the same time as that, kind of running concurrently, we want to influence the political debate and the rate at which change happens for animals, and that is somewhat independent of whether or not we are elected to decision-making bodies or not. And we, like the Dutch party, we call ourselves a testimonial party. What that means is that we try and have the highest possible policies on animal issues, that we try and get them out there into the world. And we're very happy for those policies to be adopted by other political parties, and then we can pack up and go home. So we don't exist for the sake of existing. We exist because we want these policies to ultimately be taken on board by the mainstream parties to become mainstream. And then if we don't need to be here anymore, that's fine. So we're not in it for being in politics. We're in it to try and bring about change for animals. So we are registered to contest elections in England, Wales, Scotland and Northern Ireland. So far we've stood in elections in England, in Scotland and Northern Ireland, but we've never yet stood for election in Wales. That's not by design. It's not because we haven't wanted to. It's just that we haven't yet had the membership and the candidates come forward to stand in Wales. So that's something we really would like to change. And we have one representative at the moment. We have one councillor, that is Jane Smith. She is a town councillor in a town called Alsager in Cheshire, and she's been our representative since 2017. So I'm just going to stop there and check that everyone can follow. Can you see the presentation and you can hear okay?
Yeah, it's all
anyone anyone having any problems following? No? Okay, cool. So we were originally called Animals Count, and in 2012 we decided to change our name. And one of the reasons we did that is because the name Animals Count, it was great. It was a play on words on the number of votes that we received for animals in an election, and it also indicated that animals matter, animals count. But actually a problem with it was that people didn't understand we were a political party that you could vote for, and that was kind of a key issue. We need people to vote for us, and so we wanted the name party to be in our name. And a lot of people say, why didn't you call yourself the Animal Rights Party? Which is a good question, because our philosophy is one of animal rights. And when we went through our name change process in 2012, we started off with a long list of names, and we tested these names with 3 different groups of people who were members, people who were supporters, and people who knew nothing about our party. And unfortunately, the name Animal Rights Party was the worst performing name out of all the names that we tested. And the feedback was that people were saying they wouldn't be comfortable to vote for an Animal Rights Party. And that was almost across all 3 groups, the same answer. And at the same time, Animal Welfare Party performed best, as in it came top in all the groups tested. And so we thought, well, okay, we need to be pragmatic about this, because we are in the business of asking people for their votes. And if we have a name that people are saying they won't vote for, then this is problematic. So Animal Welfare Party actually rose to the top. We weren't expecting it. It was the name that people said they liked the most. And we thought, well, actually, maybe this is something we can build consensus around, or we're acting on what there is already consensus around. So if you stop someone in the street and say, do you believe in animal welfare? Almost everyone would say yes. You have to be a pretty cold-hearted person to say, no, I don't believe in animal welfare. But maybe stopping people in the street and saying, do you believe in animal rights? Maybe that's a bigger question, and maybe people are still unsure about what they think about that. So we thought, okay, we're going to go for what there's consensus around. Almost everyone says they agree with animal welfare. Let's take that idea and let's build on that. So yeah, we don't think the time is right yet to be called the Animal Rights Party, but that doesn't mean our belief is not one of animal rights. It definitely is. So another crucial thing about us is that we are volunteer run, which means that we have no paid staff. We do this in addition or alongside our day jobs. And we're not traditional or career politicians, meaning that we've all come into this from other careers or alongside other careers or other forms of animal advocacy. And all our funds come from membership fees and donations, and we don't receive any government funds, which is unlike political parties in other countries. All our funds come from ordinary people. So if at any point going through this you do think you'd like to donate to us, the URL to donate is just animalwelfareparty.org/donate. So every time there is an election, we produce a manifesto. When it's a general election, we produce a full manifesto, which doesn't cover just animal issues, but environmental issues, housing, transport, education. So it's a full manifesto covering all the topics that any other party's manifesto would cover. And just to give you a taste of kind of where our policies are coming from on non-animal issues, we're basically always trying to look at what is the compassionate thing to do in terms of problem solving. We're always trying to come from a point of compassion in our policies. So just to run through some of our key policies, we very much focused in this climate crisis that we find ourselves in, we want government to use all the levers that are uniquely available to government to transition to a plant-based food system. And key to that, we think, is redirecting subsidies away from livestock and fisheries farming into plant-based agriculture. And we want that to be a supported transition into plant-based agriculture. We don't want any groups, any industries to really, farmers, for example, to miss out and go without an income. We want that to be supported by government because it has to work for everybody. We want to phase out animal experimentation, and governments say they want to do this often, but what we need them to set is binding targets for reduction and to stick to that. And at the same time, we need to support alternatives, not just with funding, but real support for the whole alternatives movement. When it comes to companion animals, we want to increase penalties for those convicted of animal cruelty up to a maximum custodial sentence of 10 years. And the reason is that in other countries, in various United States, in the US, for example, we do have much longer custodial sentences available of up to 10 years. And we think that a longer custodial sentence actually will act as a deterrent against the worst kinds of animal cruelty, and that it would represent the seriousness of the kind of crimes that we do sometimes see, but which seem to be punished quite leniently. We want to promote healthy plant-based lifestyle initiatives, not just in schools, but in GP practices and in the workplace as well. We want to phase out farming practices with poor welfare consequences for animals. I think if you're on this session, you probably know the kind of those farming practices that I'm talking about, but those where animals in intensive farming, where animals cannot express species-specific behavior and where cruelty is committed against them. We want to end live export and also all slaughter without prior stunning. And finally, we want to strengthen companion animal welfare with various measures such as ending breed-specific legislation, ending the sale of animals online and retail stores. And when it comes to the exotic pet trade, we actually want to stop that altogether. So a lot of people ask us if we are a single issue party, and we do get asked this quite often, are you a single issue party? And it's a question that really kind of makes me scratch my head, because to me, nothing could be further from the truth. When I look at humans and the composition of life on Earth, humans make up just 0.01% of life on Earth, so everything else is not human. But almost all our decision-making bodies, our parliaments, our assemblies, and the parties that are in them, they are there to discuss human issues. But humans are only 0.01% of life on Earth. So they are there, they're focusing, they're talking about something that is only 0.1% of life on Earth, and everything else is without representation. To me, that's a very strange question. And when people say, are you a single issue party? I kind of think, no, but maybe all the other parties are single issue parties. Maybe they should be asking themselves that question. Are we single issue parties? Are we only focusing on human issues when actually we are not the only thing happening here on Earth? We're a tiny fragment. So I don't think we are a single issue party, and I'm very happy to kind of argue that with anyone who would like to say that we are. Just to kind of elaborate on that a little bit further, looking at the UK and the population of the UK, and you know, when we talk about what's the population of the UK, everyone kind of is aware that it's 66 million humans, but almost no one really thinks about the other populations that we have in the UK. We have 11 million dogs as companion animals. We have 11 million cats, 8 million dogs as companion animals. And then our livestock population really dwarfs our human population. We've got a livestock population of around 225 million animals. Of those, 188 million chickens who live perhaps one of the most awful lives that any farmed animal ever lives. We've got 188 million of those here in the UK compared to our human population of 66 million people. And yet, our politicians, they're all talking about those 66 million people. I'm not saying that's a mistake, but why is nobody talking about our 188 million chickens? Why is nobody talking about our 22 million sheep, our 10 million cattle, our 5 million pigs? We've got a livestock population of 225 million. And in terms of politics, they're kind of unseen. Now, for me, this is an issue not just of representation, because I think they're without representation, but it's also, of course, an issue of sustainability. So we cannot go on feeding ourselves with livestock when our livestock population is there at 225 million compared to our human population 66 million. As our world population grows, we know the estimate is it's going to be 10 billion by the year 2050. We cannot have a population of 10 billion people eating animals as a way of feeding themselves, because our planet will just not support those kind of livestock populations. That's here in the UK, that's 225 million animals that have to be fed and watered. And we know that the feeding and watering of those animals is a major source of environmental degradation and the climate crisis that we find ourselves in now. So the fact that we have these huge animal populations, for me, is an issue of representation and a huge issue of sustainability. So I'd like to talk now a little bit about our international movement that we're part of. And if anyone wants to find out more about this later on, partyfortheanimals.com/international movement is the place to go. So our international movement is now more than 20 parties strong. We were all formed separately. We grew up organically in our own countries, but we share similar aims and we often work together. And we work together by advocating for animals, and it's in that process of gaining or attempting to gain seats in our decision-making bodies that we feel we are most effective for animals. So the Dutch Party for Animals, PVDD, or Party voor de Dieren, is arguably the most successful in our movement. It's got 5 members in the Dutch Parliament, 3 members in the Dutch Senate, 1 member in the EU Parliament, and over 80 members at various levels of local government in the Netherlands. Now, in 2012, Party voor de Dieren, or PVDD, they decided to start the Animal Politics Foundation, which is our kind of international organization that we're part of. And it works together to increase the pace that change happens for animals around the world. Now, we, Animal Welfare Party, usually attend 1 or 2 conferences a year where we exchange ideas and learnings, and we focus on specific topics such as stray animals or biodiversity loss. And Animal Politics Foundation also looks at ways of encouraging and developing animal advocacy in countries where there isn't yet a party for animals formed. And these representatives also come to our conferences and workshops, and we work together. So I just want to run through some of the parties for animals around the world now, because this has really grown over the years to a point that to me is very impressive now. In Australia, we have Animal Justice Party, or AWP. In Belgium, we have Dier Animal. By the way, I've asterisked the parties that have representation. I've asterisked with a pink asterisk. So Animal Justice Party have representatives. They have MPs. Dier Animal have a representative in the Brussels Parliament. In Brazil, we have Partido Animais. In the Czech Republic, we have the Democratic Green Party for Animal Rights. In Cyprus, we have Animal Party Cyprus. In Canada, the Animal Protection Party of Canada. In Denmark, Vegana Partiet, in a new party just forming right now. In Finland, we have EOP. In France, we have Parti Animaliste. In Germany, we have Tierschutzpartei, who have a representative in the European Parliament. In Greece, we have 2 parties, the Greek Party for Animals, newly formed this year, and we also have the On Vegan Political Entity, also, which came about this year. In Israel, we have the Justice for All Party. In Italy, we have Partito Animalista Italiano. In Ireland, we have Party for Animal Welfare Poor, and another party, Animals First Party in Ireland. In Moldova, we have the Party for Peoples, Nature and Animals, PONA. And in Portugal, we have PAN, who some of you may have heard of, because PAN they also have representation in their parliaments and city councils. And they've also been quite instrumental in pushing for plant-based diets to be made available in public institutions and on every menu in a publicly funded setting. In the Netherlands, we have Party voor de Dieren, who I mentioned earlier, PVDD. In Spain, we have PACMA, who've really worked tremendously hard at raising the profile of animal rights in Spain, and they just narrowly missed having a representative in the EU Parliament at the last EU elections. In Sweden, we have Djurens Party. In Switzerland, we have Tierparti Schweiz. In Uruguay, a reasonably new party, Partido Verde Animalista. In the United States, we have Humane Party. And here in the UK, Animal Welfare Party with our 1 representative. And then just to list some of the other countries that we're working with, but there isn't a party formed yet in those countries for various reasons. But we're still working with people in Algeria, Argentina, Bosnia and Herzegovina, Egypt, Georgia, Lebanon, Palestine, Serbia, Slovenia, Turkey, and the Ukraine. So rest assured that there are people in those countries as well who are very much focusing on animal politics and looking at the work of the other parties in our group. And when the time is right, I'm pretty sure that parties for animals will form in those countries as well. So just to talk a little bit about our working together, because this is a key part of kind of what we do. So we've stood in some elections together, and the first time we did this was 2014, that we decided to contest an election together. I think this is kind of history in the making. I'm not sure that this has ever happened before, and it's not been tremendously well documented by the media, but this is us kind of coming together. So in 2014, we said, which of our parties want to contest the EU elections together? And actually there were 7 of us. We contested the EU elections as the Euro Animal 7. We had a shared manifesto, and actually the result of that election, campaigning together with shared manifesto, shared videos, shared policies, there were 2 MEPs elected for the first time ever. This was history in the making in 2014. It was the first time ever that we had dedicated representatives for animals in the EU Parliament. We had Anja Hazekamp of PVDD in the Netherlands. She was sent to the EU Parliament, and Stefan Eck of Tierschutzpartei in Germany went to the EU Parliament, the first ever representatives for animals in the EU Parliament. Stefan later became an independent, but there in the EU Parliament, those 2 really began to change things for animals. Cut to 5 years later, the 2009 EU elections, we contested the EU elections again together. This time, 11 parties ran as Animal Politics EU with a shared manifesto. We launched that manifesto in the EU Parliament. We gave a press conference, and we really talked to the press about how the fact that we thought this time there would be an increased number of representatives for animals in the EU Parliament. That was correct. This time, 3 MEPs were sent back to the EU Parliament. Anja was returned from PVDD in the Netherlands. Martin Buschmann was returned for Tierschutzpartei, the German party. And Francisco Guerrero of PAN was returned for Portugal. And some of you may know this, but Anja is the president of the Animal Welfare Intergroup in the EU Parliament, and Francisco Guerrero is the vice president of that group. Now, we also, at the same time as contesting elections together, we also take part in various campaigns together or activities. One of these was outside the EU Parliament last year in Strasbourg. We wanted, ahead of a crucial vote on animal transport, we wanted to really drive home to MEPs what the reality of animal transport is like for animals being transported across states, across the EU, and actually out through the EU into third-party countries. So we took part in a flash mob outside the EU Parliament, a flash mob that was both a daytime and nighttime flash mob using different lighting elements. And the morning of the vote, we parked this truck outside the EU Parliament, and the representatives of each party for animals gave speeches outside the EU Parliament talking about the reality of live animal export. Last year in Porto, in Portugal, we took part in a demonstration outside the Brazilian consulate against the Mercosur trade deal. And at that time, we were really talking about how the Mercosur trade deal would be bad for the environment, would be bad for the Amazon, would be bad for environmental degradation and biodiversity loss. And we've been talking about that message ever since, trying to oppose the Mercosur trade deal. And in October last year, for the October Rebellion, Anja Hazekamp came over to London. She took part in the demonstrations in the city. She also gave a talk in the Animal Rebellion tent at Vauxhall. I don't know if some of you were at that talk, but Anja is very interested in also knowing what Animal Rebellion is doing and taking part, being part of Animal Rebellion actions where she can. I also gave a talk at that event as well. Some of you may have seen that or may remember that. And then in terms of the coronavirus pandemic, this is something that almost everyone in our movement has been worried about for several years, and our manifestos have been warning of the dangers of zoonotic diseases linked to intensive animal farming for several years. And so this coronavirus pandemic is of course concerning, but what's equally concerning is the idea that there may be future pandemics after this one that could be even worse, pandemics linked to our antibiotic resistance brought about by industrialized farming. And we've been very worried about this for a long time. So PVDD, for example, released a documentary on zoonotic diseases just a few years back. And Anja Hazekamp chaired an intergroup meeting this week on the COVID-19 pandemic and zoonotic diseases caused by wildlife trade and consumption of intensive livestock farming. That debate is still available online at animalwelfareintergroup.eu. If you want to watch that, you can still watch that debate. And we're now looking at whether we can come together in some kind of coordinated action to help land the message that protecting ourselves from future pandemics is not just about action elsewhere, somewhere else, in China, in Asia. It's not just about action elsewhere, it's about action here in our own countries. We cannot stop future pandemics unless we are going to take action here in our own countries. So just to talk a little bit now about elections, because that is the kind of the core body of what we do. So we've contested 13 elections since our creation in 2006. The most recent election was the December 2019 general election, in which we had 6 candidates. That was a record for us. Here in the UK, and this isn't the same in other countries, here in the UK, we contest all elections by constituency or local area, and that is not the same in other countries in the world. It's sometimes a disadvantage for us. And also another issue that we are battling against is the fact that most, but not all of our elections are run under the first past the post system. And they also involve paying really quite sizable deposits for every single constituency that we contest. And that isn't the same in other countries. And it wasn't until we started working together and having these conversations that we realized, hey, it doesn't work like this in other countries. They don't pay to stand for election in other countries, and they don't take part in their elections by constituency the way we do. So as a small party, we have been traditionally very interested in elections that are run under forms of proportional representation, such as the EU Parliament election, which sadly we won't be taking part in anymore, such as the London Assembly elections, which are run under a form of PR, the Scottish Parliament election and the Welsh Assembly elections. So people might ask, general elections, they take place under the first past the post system. Why do we take part in them? We still always feel that there is a good reason to take part in general elections, and that's because it helps raise awareness of the party. Normally the media are more interested in general elections than any other type of election. So we take part because we want the media to notice what we're doing and ask us questions. We want to be asked questions about why we have the policies that we have. We want to be talking about animal issues. So even though general elections are tough for us to make headway in, we still want to take part. And in case you're wondering, how do we choose our candidates? So all candidates need to be members of Animal Welfare Party, and once you're a member of Animal Welfare Party, when there is an election coming up that we are planning to contest, we email all our members telling them how to apply centrally for when our candidate search is open. So just to kind of show you a little bit about what campaigning might look like when you're a candidate for election. Obviously there is street campaigning, where we are out in the streets talking to people, leafleting, talking to voters about our policies, and actually people receive our policies quite warmly. We get lots of good positive feedback when we talk about our policies in the street with people. We don't just contest elections in cities, we've contested elections in towns and in villages, and actually we find that our message is just as well received in rural areas as it is in city areas. We also, as part of elections, take part in hustings. This image right now is of a hustings that took place in the New Forest constituency in December this year. Often hustings take place in kind of community locations. This hustings took place in a local church in the New Forest East constituency, and our candidate, Professor Andrew Knight, was one of the candidates on the panel there, and the audience can ask questions the panel members, the candidates, to try and find out what their positions are on various issues. And so hustings is one of the parts of election campaigning, and hustings take place up and down the country in all kinds of community locations. And of course, when we take part in elections, we're very happy when we get asked to do media interviews, and we want to be able to influence the political debate that way and get issues onto the political debate that aren't being talked about. And in particular, we really want people to start talking about speciesism, what it is and why it's not acceptable in the year 2020 and beyond. So how do we do at elections? You might be wondering that. So it's a kind of long, slow process of chipping away and getting known and getting people to feel confident voting for us. I'm not going to run through this whole list of our election results, but just to point out a few there. The first ever general election we stood in, we got 0.3% of the vote, and we kind of expected that. We knew that people wouldn't, being a small new party, people probably wouldn't feel that confident voting for us. But actually, each time we've taken part in a general election, that's gone up. So the last general election we stood in with 6 candidates, we actually got 1% of the vote, which is good for us. It shows real progression. But our best result actually was in 2019, just last year. It was in local elections, and it was when Jane Smith defended her seat in Alsager. She won the seat. She retained her seat with 9.8% of the vote. And at the same time, Mina DeRue in Rochester, she got 4.1% of the vote. And there are 2 best results ever in a local election. And that's good news, because it means going forwards, we really we think we can do well in local elections. Sorry, just to go back a page, actually, just to something to highlight actually is that in some of the elections where we're standing in big areas, so for example in London, in the EU Parliament elections, we stood in the whole of London, which meant that the message we're telling people is that if you live in London, you can vote for us. Actually, there we got 25,000 votes, and that's been kind of typical for when we stand in one big large area where anyone can vote for us, and we're saying, yes, if you live in London, you can vote for us. In those kind of elections, we tend to do pretty well. So 25,000 votes, 1.1% of the total vote, we were pretty happy with, and that's something that we also want to build on as well going forwards. So in terms of representation, I mentioned that we have 1 councillor, that's Jane Smith in Alsager in Cheshire. She was originally elected as a Green Party councillor, and she changed to Animal Welfare Party in 2017. She defended her seat last year, and she retained her seat with 9.8% of the vote, which was a record for our party and more than both Labour and Conservative combined, which was a great result for us. Jane Smith is also the deputy leader of our party, and she runs the Cheshire East, Animal Welfare Party Cheshire East group. So what does representation look like in action? I just want to talk you through some of the things that Jane has been able to do whilst being on the council in Alsager. So a hedgehog motion is something that she's known for. So the hedgehog motion basically stipulated that for every new planning application coming before the town council, you had to either stipulate native hedging, or where native hedging is not possible, that any solid wall or fence must incorporate a wildlife tunnel. And that wildlife tunnel is to allow hedgehogs and other small animals through access. You might think, well, why does that matter? Why do we want that? It's because the hedgehog population of the UK has suffered a drastic decline in recent decades, to the point where we really need to think of how to prevent this population declining any further. And one of the reasons it's declining is because hedgehogs need to access quite a large distances at night in the mating season while they're looking for food and mates. And so they need to be able to pass through multiple gardens. And if our gardens are all blocked off with walls and fences that they can't pass through, they kind of can't roam and reach the territory that they need to. So these wildlife tunnels are actually crucial. I think it is kind of indicative of what someone who is a dedicated representative for animals will do when they're on a decision-making body. They will just be posing and asking those questions that maybe other people they're not opposed to themselves. It's just they wouldn't have thought of that because they're thinking of other issues. And so since Jane successfully passed this hedgehog motion in Alsatia, well, then over 50 other local towns, they want to do something. It's a good idea, they want to do something similar. So they weren't at all opposed to this idea. It's something they all thought, yes, this is a good idea, we can do this. And so that's kind of a good example of what a representative for animals will do when they're in a decision-making body. Other issues that Jane has worked on in 2019, so just last year, she secured the standalone pollinator action plan for her local town, making sure that there was a pollinator action plan there. And she did that because at the borough council level, she felt they were being too slow, not taking enough action. She's also lobbied Cheshire East Borough Council to include plant-based meals in schools. She's lobbied for measures against air pollution and against development and tree felling in her town. And one of the things that she's very well known for is speaking out passionately against the badger cull in Cheshire and against the badger cull taking place in Cheshire East land. And she is also on the local Wounded Badger Patrol group. So Jane is a kind of one-woman powerhouse of action in Cheshire, and we're very pleased that we have her there in Cheshire. Other activities that we do, obviously taking part in elections is our core business, but at the same time as taking part in elections, we also do demos, protests, talks and speeches, stunts, walks. Jane does Wounded Badger Patrol, we do letter writing and signing letters. We write articles for the media and try and get those published. We do media interviews, obviously, and we work with and support our international colleagues on projects that they're working on as well. So we see this as a kind of worldwide mission that we're trying to bring about change for animals around the world, and we try and do whatever we can to help that happen in whatever country that we can help in. So things that are upcoming for us. So just to let you know what's kind of on our radar, we have the London Mayoral and Assembly elections. They were due to take place next month, this year. We were gearing up for that, as some of you may know that we were gearing up. We spoke to some animal advocates in London about the London Assembly elections. Sadly, they've been postponed until next year, so they take place next May now. That is, it's not a first past the post election. It's run under a form of proportional representation, and to win a seat on the London Assembly, we would need around 5% of the vote. And last time we contested that election, we won 1% of the vote. So to win a seat on the London Assembly, we need to take our 1% of the vote that we got last time, and we need to turn it into 5% of the vote. Now, we know that one day we can do that. And so we are trying really hard to do that next time there is a London Assembly election, which is next year. At the same time now as the London Assembly election next year, we're going to have the Scottish Parliament election. We have contested that before. We contested it in 2016. We won 0.73% of the vote by standing in the Glasgow region. To win a seat in the Scottish Parliament there, we would need 8 to 10% of the vote. So we need to take that 0.73% and turn it into 8 to 10%. And we know that one day we can do that as well. Also next year is the Welsh Assembly election. We haven't taken part in the Welsh Assembly elections before, but we're very interested to do that. And what's interesting this year, next year, is that people aged 16 plus can vote in the Welsh Assembly election. And so if we do have people watching in Wales, or you have friends, colleagues, relatives in Wales, and they might be interested in being part of taking part in the Welsh Assembly elections, please do let them know about us. And also, at the same time as that, we want to expand further across the UK by contesting elections and by establishing local groups in other areas. So I'm just going to briefly mention the cost of taking part in elections, because this is something that is really kind of crucial to what limits our activities in elections are the election deposits. So the fact that we have to pay deposits to stand really limits where we can stand and whether we can stand at all. So for example, just to take part in a general election, we pay £500 for each constituency that we contest. So last general election, we contested 6 constituencies. That means we spent £3,000 in election deposits. when we take part in the London Assembly elections, the deposit is £5,000 to stand. And so next May, we will pay £5,000 to stand in the London Assembly elections. If we want to take part in the London mayoral elections, the deposit is £20,000. So you need to pay £20,000 if you want to take part in the London mayoral election. So the cost for some of the elections that we take part in are huge, and when we sort of tally up how much we've spent in election deposits, since 2008 we've spent £29,500 in election deposits, and so most of our money goes on election deposits, which means we have almost no money for doing anything else. So we are always kind of operating in this low budget capacity because all the money we have, pretty much, we are spending on election deposits. And I wish that wasn't the case. And I know that isn't the case in other countries. I know that political parties don't pay to stand in elections in other countries. And I kind of now have come to the conclusion that this is undemocratic. It's not fair, because there is a huge amount of support for what we're doing, for policies about animals, and the fact that we are almost prevented from taking part in those elections because we might not have the money to take part, to me, is undemocratic. So that's the way it is at the moment. We're going to fight against that, of course, and against our political system, but for now, that's the way it is. So we really do want to encourage people to, if you like what we're doing, you want to support us, if you'd like to see us succeed, please do consider supporting us in one way. And one of the things you can do is become a member. Membership, you can take out membership from the age of 15 onwards. You can join online at animalwelfareparty.org. You can join from any country in the world. Costs start from £4 if you're a young member, and if you're an adult, the costs begin at £5, and then we have a sliding scale depending on what you earn. And if you're already a member of another party, we allow associate membership of our party. And you can join as an associate member from age 15 onwards. The costs start at £3 if you're a young member, or from £4 if you're an adult member, and then we have a sliding scale again depending on what you earn. And if you want to interested in taking out membership, please do visit animalwelfareparty.org/join. That's the place to go to sign up. So that is kind of the end of my talk now. I really just want to say thank you for your attention. Thank you for sitting through that, and thank you for kind of putting your thought and energy into what I was talking about. I'm just going to leave up on screen there our contact details. So animalwelfareparty.org is our website. On Facebook, we're Animal Welfare Party. On Twitter, we're Animals Count. And on Instagram, we're Animal Welfare Party UK. So hopefully we have some time now for some questions, if anybody has any. The next session, which I'm just going to, because it's World Day for Animals in Laboratories today, the next session is Professor Andrew Knight, who's talking about humane research methods in veterinary and other biomedical studies. He's coming up next. If you do want to be part of that session, underneath there is the link to the Eventbrite session. I don't know if you can all see that, but I guess if you just Google that, humane teaching methods within veterinary and biomedical education, that link should come up if you do want to be part of, if you want to join Andrew Knight's session, which is coming up next. But just to go back to our screen and our contact details there. Does anybody have any questions in the time that we've got left? We have 15 minutes left.
Yeah, I was just going to quickly jump in. For anyone that does want to ask a question, either feel free to put it in the chat and we'll try and get to it. Or if you go on the bottom of your Zoom screen, there should be a button called, I think it's Participants, and then you can raise your hand. And then, yeah, we can just sort of like do it that way. And whoever's hand we see pop up, we can go with. While people are figuring out where the raise hand button is and stuff, there's one that's already in the chat, Vanessa, and it was what percentage of the vote is needed for a refund from IC?
So in a general election, it's 5%. You get your deposit back. Yeah.
Cool. Nice.
Yeah. Someone's answered that already. Actually, I can see.
Right. Oh, okay.
There's
cool.
kind of conversation going on. Yes.
Yeah. Brad's also got a hand up. So Brad, go for it.
Hi, Vanessa.
Hello.
My question was, if you become a member of the Animal Welfare Party, what does that person, like, what do they have access to? What can they do, etc.?
Well, basically, if you want to take part in any of the functions of the party, so if you want to be a candidate, if you want to vote in any of our elections, if you want to consider becoming a member of our committee of national officers, then you need to be a member to do that. So all our candidates are members of the party, so that's one thing. But apart from that, so being a member, essentially you receive emails from us if you want to. So if you sign up to receive news updates from us, which is optional, you get emails from us about what we're doing, and you're invited to kind of any events that we're organising or taking place in your local area. But mainly it's just about supporting the party, and it's kind of as much or as little as you want it to be. So if you want to make it more, if you're interested in being a candidate, or if you're interested in being the kind of running of the party, having a role, then kind of you do that through becoming a member, if that makes sense.
Thank you.
Anyone else? I'm struggling to see some of the questions, so maybe Lawrence, if you could tell me just what the questions are.
So there's one here. So are there ways I can help in my local area, brackets Sheffield, once lockdown is over? I'm afraid I do not have the financial ability to donate much, but I do have time to help with any events, etc.
Yes, well, definitely Sheffield is an area that we have been looking at for a long time, and we've really been wanting to expand in Sheffield. I have a personal connection in that I was born in Sheffield. I lived in Sheffield until I was 7, and so I know Sheffield quite well, and I know there's a huge scene in Sheffield, and we really want to kind of make the most of that. So we've for a long time been meaning to have a kind of intro session in Sheffield. We'd love to have people standing for election in Sheffield. So the first stage really is consider becoming a member or an associate member or a supporter, so that you can kind of stay in touch with us and find out what we're doing. And definitely, if you're interested in contesting local councils elections in Sheffield next time they come up, please think about that. We really need more people to, once they're familiar with the party and what we're about, we really need more people to consider being candidates, being willing to put themselves forward in elections, so that gradually there's more and more people out there talking about animals and the environment and talking about them in elections and not just about people. Any other questions?
There's another one. So the next one was, what remote volunteer opportunities do you have at this time, if any at all?
Very good question. We are looking for volunteers, definitely. The best thing to do would be to email us directly with a little bit about yourself, what your skills are, and we'll see if we can match your skills and experience with something that we need. So if you could send an email to info@animalwelfareparty.org. So that's info@animalwelfareparty.org, and just telling us a little bit about you, how much time you have, or your skills and your experience. That would be great.
Great. There was another one in the chat. You did cover it at the very start of the talk, but just if you could quickly reiterate it for anyone that joined late. It was about the reason for the inclusion of the word welfare in the name of the party.
Yeah, so a lot of people ask us why we called Animal Welfare Party if our philosophy is actually animal rights, and it is a really good question. So we originally were called Animals Count, and we went through a name change process in 2012, and we wanted a new name that began with the word animal, had the word party in it. So just to explain, some elections the ballot paper is ordered alphabetically, and if you have a name that begins with A, then you're at the top of the ballot paper. So in the EU elections last year, we were at the top of the ballot paper, and it's something we like. There's a slight advantage to being top of the ballot paper. So we wanted to keep animal as the first word, party at the end, and something in the middle. And we tested lots of different names. We tested Animal Rights Party, Animal Welfare Party, lots of other names, sort of a variation on those themes, Animal Something Party. And Animal Rights Party was the worst performing name, sadly, of all the 3 groups that we tested. And the feedback was generally that people didn't, they were less likely to vote for Animal Rights Party than any of the other names that we gave them to choose from. So an Animal Welfare Party was the best performing name, and we weren't expecting that, but it is just the feedback that came back of the testing was that Animal Welfare Party did best. So we kind of looked at that as, well, you know, there's consensus around animal welfare. You know, if you stop people in the street and ask them, do you agree with animal welfare? Most people would say yes. And yet if you stop people in the street and say, do you believe in animal rights? Maybe some people would have to think about that a bit longer. Maybe you get less people saying yes. And so we have to really, as a political party, we have to be very pragmatic, because ultimately what we're asking for is for votes. And just when you saw that list of kind of how we've performed in elections, and you see that the kind of kindest election to us is the London Assembly election. We need 5% of the vote to win a seat in the London Assembly election, and yet at this moment at time we're on 1.1%, and we need to take 1.1% to 5% to win a seat on the London Assembly election. We have to have a name that people feel comfortable voting for. So being very pragmatic at this moment in time, we have this name Animal Welfare Party. But it is right that it doesn't completely sum up what we're about. It doesn't sum up our final end goal. And yeah, it's something we're aware of. But right now we think there is consensus around that, and that pragmatically it works at the moment, if that makes sense.
The next question, Nathan did reply to it in the text, but I just wanted to see if you had any thoughts. If someone becomes a candidate, does it prevent their involvement in other forms of action, so like direct action or something like that? And Nathan has said that it doesn't. He is a member and engages in peaceful animal rights direct action too. No, not at all. No. I mean, obviously, no, we like our candidates to be very active out there, speaking for animals in whatever ways they can. Obviously, if you're a candidate and you're about to do something very illegal and that you thought it might end up reflecting badly on the party, we might prefer to have a conversation about that and see how the two could work together. But I can't think of any time that situation has ever actually arisen. So yeah, I mean, it's something that we think it was beneficial to discuss, but most of the time we were all very active out there, taking part in actions anyway. The next question was, what is the relationship between the Animal Welfare Party and animal rights / welfare groups and charities like Animal Equality or the RSPCA?
Yeah, I mean, that is a good question, because, well, we might all be supportive of each other, or we might all support certain campaigns that one group is running, and yeah, we might support each other's campaigns, but something that, well, I guess it's a one-way street, because officially almost no other animal organisation will ever say, yes, I support Animal Welfare Party, and that's where I'm kind of putting all my hope and efforts, because really it means for them that they are then cutting off conversations with all other political parties, and that is not that's not what they're about. Other animal organisations exist to further conversations for animals in whatever ways they can, and that means by talking to all political parties. So all political parties are talking, all animal organisations are pretty much talking to all the political parties out there to try and progress their aims. And so we don't ever really have an animal organisation that throws itself behind us and says, you know, I'm supporting Animal Welfare Party, that's it. And we don't expect that anymore. We know what the game is, we don't expect that. So yeah, we might support a campaign that Animal Equality is running right now. We might be very much behind that, and you know, we might support an RSPCA campaign one day and an Animal Equality campaign the next, or an animal aid campaign the next day, but we don't expect them to officially support us back, because they can't, and we know they can't. So we know how it works. If that answers that question. Is that what the question was about, or was it about something slightly different?
I mean, for me, it seemed to answer the question, but I'm sure they can reply in the chat. I'm not sure how long you want to go on for. On my clock, we've got 4 minutes left. Are you happy for one or two?
Yeah, let's take those 4 minutes. Yeah,
Oh, nice
absolutely.
one. Brad's got his hand up again. So, Brad?
Hiya. I appreciate the use of focus groups to come, well, I presume it was some sort of focus group to come to welfare within the party name. Do you think, or is there a sort of vision on the party's behalf that eventually you might look to change again to rights? Is that part of the long-term vision at all, or?
Yeah, I think we're always conscious of when might be the right time to become the Animal Rights Party. When might people be ready for that? And the other possibility is, at the time that we changed our name, there was already a party called the Animal Protection Party. We liked the name Animal Protection Party, but there was already a party here in the UK called Animal Protection Party. Some of you might know that. I think they've now disbanded. And so, yeah, we might in the future look at adopting a new name that sits more with what our ethos is. But I still think that right now, whilst we're polling around 1%, or, we need to get up to 5%, I don't think that we would make that change like in the next 2 years. I think we still need people to even feel more comfortable with this idea of what is this political party about animals? What are they doing here in the scene? We still need to kind of counter that kind of that reaction that we get from people, almost as if you have no place in this debate. We have to kind of combat that first and still get people even comfortable with us being on the scene, so to speak. But yeah, we don't ever lose focus of our philosophy. Our philosophy is animal rights. We're against speciesism. We're going to push that message as much as we can, whenever we can.
Thank you.
Thank you. Another question was, do you work with universities and students in vegan/vegetarian societies of their universities?
We have a couple of times, we've done a couple of talks at certain universities, vegetarian or vegan societies. We've done a couple of talks, and we would like to kind of expand that further. And obviously Andrew Knight, who's coming up next, Professor Andrew Knight, is based at the University of Winchester, and he does a lot of work with his students at his university. He's quite well known in that scene. But yeah, it's an interesting angle to take, the working through universities. I think it's a good one to pursue.
Right. There was a follow-up question to a minute ago. You mentioned I think it was the Animal Protection Party.
Yeah.
And IC's asking if there was a particular reason that you and others didn't join that party and instead started a separate one.
Yeah, the Animal Protection Party, I think formed specifically to tackle an issue in one specific area of, it was in England. And as far as I know, it was a party without a manifesto, without key policies. It was formed specifically to try and unseat the incumbent MP at the time, who had been involved in the creation, I think, of an animal testing facility. And it was formed specifically with that aim to unseat this MP, and I think they were successful. So they were sort of set up with one particular aim in mind, and it ultimately disbanded, as far as I know. So that was why we were not involved in that. It was before my time with the Animals Count or Animal Welfare Party, but they retained the name for a while, and now I think they may have, that name's not functioning anymore, as far as I can see.
Right. I think we're probably out of time. Just so we can allow people to get over to the next.
There we are, 7. Yeah. Thank you very much, everyone. Really appreciate your attention and your interest. And any other questions, please send them to me at info@animalwelfareparty.org. Thank you.